Now, it is time to welcome our 2019 keynote speaker. Pamela Erman has spent her entire business career in real estate, obtaining her real estate license at 18 years old. Her intense focus on acquiring that knowledge, combined with award-winning sales production, opened doors to full-time management by the age of 24. Since then, she has spent nearly 25 years coaching and helping individual agents and teams achieve their highest levels of productivity. Pam is the author and creator of 2 training series about real estate business planning and the dynamic growth of real estate teams. She was selected as the Real Estate Educator of the Year for the state of Virginia. Please welcome to the stage your 2019 Middle Tennessee Realtors Convention keynote speaker, sponsored by New American Funding, Pam Ermen.
Thank you, thank you. Hello, everybody. Man, you all throw a party. I guess that's what happens in Nashville on a regular basis, doesn't it? I am thrilled to be here today. I have to tell you that in the introduction, they usually talk about the fact that I had started my career at 18, and that's all well and true, but that's not really my true claim to fame. My real true claim to fame is I'm probably one of the few people that you will ever meet in your real estate career whose age was equal to the interest rate at any given time in their career. Now think about that. I went in 1978. Anybody else out there still standing from 1978? Right? 1978, the interest rate went up to 18%. But I have to tell you this, and when I see rooms like this, and I see the talent in rooms like this, and I see people that I love in rooms like this, like Mr. Brian Copeland, who I have to tell you is about as good as they get. I mean that sincerely. I realize what a privilege it is to be in real estate. Do y'all feel that way? Okay, let's try that again. The interest rates are good, guys. Let's try one more. Do you feel that way? I'm telling you, it is a heck of a career. We surely have some things to be excited about, that's for sure. And what we're going to talk about today is this whole idea of being unplugged and connecting to that connected consumer. How many of y'all feel like you've run into a couple of them recently? Am I right? Very definite personality. And that's what we're going to talk about today. When you all pop up based on the Urban Land Institute's emerging trends, and you all are number 3 in emerging markets for real estate in 2020. You got to be prepared for that, because you know a lot of stuff will be coming your way at that point. And then we come down to you. Who are you when it comes to the connected consumer, right? So I'm going to try an experiment. Now, I might be kind of pushing a little bit, and maybe only a few people in the room that can participate, but I'm going to try it anyway. How many of you all in the room can put your hands on a phone? I mean, like, really get your hands on it quickly, and if you can, hold it up in the air. You got a phone. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. We are them, right? We are them, the connected consumer. We all have our phones. They probably go with us everywhere we go, right? If we are them, what do we have to learn about the connected consumer? But the truth is this. We as a connected consumer in our personal life is very different from the connected consumer that we interact with in our business life. Would everybody agree with that? It's very different. And when we want to, get a legitimate application to that, I want you to think about the last time that you held an open house, right? I mean, you're there, your phone's with you. The couple walks in the door. How many of y'all have met this person or this couple that walks in the door? They walk through the house. You try and engage with them, try and start some conversation, find some common denominator, maybe some value, and they walk through the house, make very little contact, and as they're walking out the door, you're making your last effort. And maybe even you say to them something like, I'll be happy to offer you my firstborn. And they say, no thanks, we can find it on the internet. Right? I mean, let's be legitimate. It doesn't matter what it is in many cases that we offer them. That individual is highly self-sufficient. Highly self-sufficient. But let's go back for a minute and let's think about the power of this whole concept of the connected consumer and that mobile phone that is in their hands and in our hands. If I were to ask you all tomorrow, going out the front door, which of the two you take with you if you could only take one of them? If you could take your set of car keys and you could take your mobile phone with you, how many of you all would close that door, lock it behind you, and start walking? Right? Until what? Until you called Uber. That's exactly right. Because we know how it works at this point, right? That culprit, though, is really the reason for a lot of what's going on out in the real world. The culprit, that phone, is the catalyst for a lot of the growth that's going on, not just in our local markets and our local industries and our own countries, but around the global world. Because as of 2020, for the first time, the global economy, or the global population, has a majority of 51% that are connected to the digital age. 51%. That's a huge amount of people that are out there at this point. And when you think about that in terms of 51%, I was talking to Brian just a little bit ago, and I said, that's kind of like knowing that Jesus must be close, right? I mean, when you think about the 51%. All right. In looking at this and to talk about the top 5 uses of a cell phone, what do they really use it for? I mean, we've all seen this because we're not picking it up and we're not using it to make phone calls, are we? This is not how we're using it. We're using it for the texting, right? We're using it, oops, oh, where did my thumb go? We're using it, and I need one of these for my pictures. Right? Here we go. Everybody wave. There we go. One on this side. Come on, this side also. Back here. Come on, wave. Come on. Need to see you. Those are going to go on the internet. That's how we're seeing them being used most of the time. But see, I don't think you're here today in this kind of a conversation to learn how to be some selfie superstar, right? Or to be an Instagram icon. You're here to be able to figure out how to connect with that connected consumer in a way that makes you more money. Fair enough? It's not about just learning how to master social media. It's about really learning to understand who the connected consumer is. And so I want to take just a few minutes of your time, and I really want to study who this person is. Who is the connected consumer? Who's that person that's out there that when you are at the open house, when you are on the phone, when you're trying to make a connection to that individual, who are they and what are they thinking? And in looking at this, one of the things that I want us to be aware of is it's not by age. I think sometimes when we hear the generational aspects of something, we're thinking this is an age-driven consumer, and it's not. It's a person who is, or a group that is connected by just that, connections. The ability to live in the digital age. Now, they have what they call the hyper-connected consumer, and that tends to be dropped as the age brackets start to bring it down a little bit. They tend to be a little bit more connected than the rest of them. But they not only live in the digital age, they live in the digital age. Micah, come up here. All the way up. Come on. How many of y'all know Micah? Brian Copeland's son. Now, Micah, today you told everybody what the temperature was, didn't you? So can you tell them, where did you get that information? Well, first of all, what was the temperature?
57.
57 degrees? And who told you that?
Alexa.
Alexa. And then what did you say about Alexa? What'd you tell your dad when he said Alexa? And you said, yeah, Alexa is what?
Everywhere.
Everywhere. Thank you for your help. At that age, they're living in the digital age, aren't they? They're participating on a regular basis and living in the digital age. They communicate, entertain themselves, research, and purchase all within the digital age. They feel cut off when they're not online instead of what we think when they are offline. And I had this experience with my daughter where we were in the car, and you probably can relate to this. We got into the car and we were starting to drive away. She happened to be in the back seat with one of her very close friends. And I noticed they were being awfully quiet, and they surely weren't mad at each other. This went on for about 10, 15 minutes. And I finally turned around and I said, "Are you all texting to each other?" Well, of course, that's what was going on, is that they're talking back and forth, texting in a car instead of communicating just one-on-one. So again, they feel cut off when they're offline, not just online. Secondly, 60% of them use the internet as their main source of entertainment. Now, this affected me when we got to the point of taking care of a lot of the rentals that we had. We accumulated a number of rentals. In that, we had a number of properties that we had furnished, and we were also paying for all the utilities on them. And what I found in the last year or two is that one of the most expensive utilities that I had to pay for was the internet and cable. When I started thinking about how I was going to start cutting some of those costs, I figured out that I could offer internet services, but I didn't have to offer cable services because of why? What are they watching? They're watching all the other Netflix, right? Hulu, Amazon. All of them are moving into that realm. In fact, while I was in the room taking care of some of the stuff that I was working on for this, my daughter and a very good friend of mine were watching a series on Netflix. What was it? A 10 section series of it while y'all sat. Third, research. They do all the research. And see, this is the real paradox with this particular mentality, is that they are uber independent. That's intentional. They're independent, yet they rely on everybody else's opinion. So research is such that they intend to be very independent in the process, but they rely on everybody else's opinions before they make decisions. On purchasing, they have a very strong voice and very much brand loyalty. Now, the interesting thing, though, one of the things that I thought was probably the most interesting, is what it said is 70% of them actually said that what the digital age allows them to do is choose to take their services elsewhere. Not use a service, but choose to take their services elsewhere. So when we start to think about how does this apply to us, how are we interacting with this person, then we have to understand that 9 times out of 10, it's not about coming to us for services, it may be about leaving us and finding somebody else for the same services. And this particular fact that came out of Digital Nation really supported that. And this is what they said: a negative online review, which is considered 3 stars or less. Now, can you imagine that? They consider a negative online review 3 stars or less. And knowing that can lose a business as much as 30 new business opportunities. Now, why is that? Why would a 3-star review be considered a negative? Not neutral, right? That's a little bit better than half. Why is it negative? Because what? What's available to them? 5 stars at any given time, right? And so when we figure out that people get online, it's very easy for them to look for the 5-star review. So if what we're offering is not 5 stars, 70% of them are finding a way to do business elsewhere. So we have to be well aware of that. And they isolate their needs from your value. The bottom line is they're looking for control. They all want control of their decisions, of their communities, of the research that they do, the ultimate outcome, and they're in a protected environment when they do that. But when it's all said and done, you would think that all of that control would actually make them more connected, right? But the truth is what? They're more disconnected. Now, there's a lot of places where they can connect in, but the truth is this ends up being in many ways a disconnected consumer. There's one point, though, that I really want to make about this. How many of y'all obviously have heard of Michael Dell? Michael Dell, owner of Dell Computers, said this. He said, if you get these 3 C's, he called it the 3 C's for success. If you get these 3 C's in any specific community, in any specific adventure or venture, that venture will be successful. It was content, the delivery of content, commerce, the capacity to buy and sell, and community, the building of relationships. And I thought about that when I first read it, and I thought, you could apply that to a church. And isn't it true? If you go to a church and the pastor doesn't deliver quality content, is there the chance you might go someplace else next week, right? If they don't pass around the plate and collect a tithe or offering, is it possible that that guy won't be paid or that woman won't be paid next week? And the possibility of church not being available to you sooner or later will shut it down. And third, community. After you get up and leave, are people getting together and building a community that builds something that makes that church very strong? So when I looked at that, I thought, well, how does that apply to this whole concept of the connected consumer? Do they have the 3 C's of success within their realm? And the reason why that's so darn important is because if they can operate within this sense of isolation, which says, I have all the content I need, I can buy and sell all that I want or all that I need within this realm or environment, and I have the communities that I'm part of, then what possibly opens that door for our need to enter in? How do we come to that place? And this is one of the things that does differ. And see, we always used to say, are we just like the travel agencies? Are we really the individuals that are, like on the same path of finding that we have no value to the consumer? And yet this company, you might want to research them, they're called Zen Media. Zen Media has done some really great white papers that are all about the connected consumer. And one of the things that they talk about is the difference with the connected consumer is sooner or later, 9 times out of 10, they go offline, right, in order to engage with the product that they're interested in. And see, the difference for me was this. I had a pretty darn expensive refrigerator break recently, and I went online. I did the content, I researched everything that I needed, I looked at all the different places that I could buy it, I checked all the comments and the recommendations and reviews, and I bought that darn refrigerator and never stepped one foot out of my house in order to be able to do that. In that particular case, content, commerce, and community worked. But here's the difference with what we do. They gotta come see our houses. Right? They've got to walk out the door and connect to something that really has an emotional connection, which is about what we're getting ready to talk about. That is the flip in regards to moving them out of an environment that they're very comfortable in and into one that allows us to interact. This is really kind of the only difference. We can look at it and say there's the iBuyer growth coming up, right? How many of y'all have started to see some of this iBuyer impact? And what is it? I think we even had a class today. Is there one coming up, or was it this afternoon? There's one coming up for that discussion. But one of the things I think we have to be aware of is that right now, the iBuyer volume is less than 1% of market share. So the ability for them to stay inside of their community and take care of all of their needs when it comes to real estate is still a very low percentage of business going on without them coming out that door, moving offline into our environments and engaging. So it gives us every opportunity to do that. One of the things that we're going to talk about this afternoon is really the whole iBuyer process, when you think about it, is no different from those postcards and those letters, is it? I mean, when you really think about it, the people that have been sending things out to say, we can buy your house and we can do it without you having to do any kind of repairs or anything else, just give us a call and we'll close on them. And I think we have to keep that in perspective when we're starting to deal with the whole iBuyer concept. Between my session in the afternoon, the ones that you've had in the morning, this idea of interacting with the connected consumer through strategies, through processes, through facts and figures and knowledge. There's all kinds of things today that we're going to be talking about that are going to help you do that. But the transition that I want to make now is probably the most important thing that I think we're going to talk about today, because I think it's the difference between us taking all this conversation about all these facts and figures and turning them into the other side of real estate, the side that, honest to gosh, can double your production and double your income in 2020, especially in a market that's going to be one of the top 3 markets in the United States. And that's what I call and refer to as emotional selling. Emotional selling, the emotional connection between you and that individual. Because see, again, when they leave that environment where they're empowered, are they empowered on the online environment? Do they feel an empowerment in that? Do they feel a control in that? But there is also something that I really noticed when I looked at it. Isn't the basis and the foundation for that environment built on trust? Now think about that, isn't it? They trust the reviews and the recommendations of the people that tell them that it's okay to buy that product. In fact, some of the studies show that they have the same level of trust for the reviews and recommendations of individuals that they believe are like themselves as they do their own friends and family. Because they're in environments and communities that they believe they're part of. But trust is the root of their culture. See, here's how I feel about real estate. Trust is the root of our culture. The way we really make a great living in real estate is by being the individual that somebody trusts with everything that they want to do when it comes to the real estate business. Emotional selling is really driven by this process. The vast majority of prospects buy based on emotion, not logic. And then they back up what feels right by justifying the decisions with facts and figures. Does everybody agree with that? 9 times out of 10, here's what happens. Facts make them think, emotions make them act. Facts make people think, emotions make people act. And see, when they're sitting in an environment where they're in full control of facts and figures and knowledge, and they have to leave it to come out and look for real estate or the next home, one of the things that I think we miss is that person walks in the door while we're at an open house or just showing them a piece of property, and the woman says, well, that's a really big backyard. And see, what she really may be saying is, oh my gosh, I can see our 2 children who I love and adore and are at the center of every decision that I make playing in that backyard. See, that's what they're really saying. What is it that connects me emotionally to this process that ultimately, once I lock in, will help me to then justify that decision with facts and figures. This is actually a study at Duke University. Duke University has done a study called Neuro Economics. And here's what they found, in case you're out there going, I'm not so sure about this. It's been proven that there is a very specific place in your brain, and it puts the value of something in the same place as the feelings that you have about it. So when you're thinking about something, the feelings that you have about something and the value you place on it are processed in exactly the same place in the brain. Pretty powerful when you think about people coming into real estate and making some decisions. Now, there's some things that we're going to do at the end. I'm going to give you, in fact, you can probably look at it right now. If you go onto your phone and you put in pamsresources.com, there'll be a number of things that pop up, like things like the emotions and some of the other stuff that I'm going to share with you. And it will download into a bot message that'll deliver some of that stuff to you if you'd like to have it from today's presentation. But here are the 8 basic emotions that drive a buying and a selling decision when you're sitting in front of a client or a customer. And so here's what I'd ask you. Think back over the last year. When you went to each one of those appointments, how often were you thinking about which emotion is driving the buying or the selling decision? Which one is it? This thing we've heard, we've all said, what's your why? But here's the reality of it. The connection to that question is what we just talked about. The what's your why is really saying to people, what of the 8 emotions that are out there are really driving the decision that you're making at this point? And there's an even higher level than this, which is called aspirations. It's kind of like emotions 2.0. And I want to share something with you that happened to me recently in our marketplace. I had been referred to this really cool couple. They lived in a house that for our marketplace was at $499,000. Our average sales price is $250,000 to $275,000. It was a very pretty house. It had been on the market for 90 days at that point. Nothing had happened. It was sitting. They had probably had 2 or 3 people through the house. House was meticulous condition. And I walked in, and the owner of the property had a ponytail down the back of his back about this long. His arms and body were covered with tattoos. Every other word that came out of his mouth was pretty salty. And he was one of the coolest guys I ever met. He was such a neat person. His wife happened to be a nurse, and she was one of the head charge nurses, very smart couple. And we sat there and talked about why this property hadn't sold. And it turned out that this individual had also found another piece of property where I live. I'm from Virginia Beach, and we were right at the line of North Carolina. Right over the line of North Carolina, they had already found a piece of property. They had been online, right, controlling everything and getting all the information. They knew exactly what they liked. And the agent that had the property on the market for 90 days refused to what? Show them the property. They refused to go down and show them the property until she felt that the house was going to sell. She didn't want to waste the time. And so in sitting down with this individual and starting to talk to them about what it was that they want to accomplish, aspirations came into the picture. When we really started to talk about what was important, he started telling me all about the fact that when they took care of this house, and it was, again, meticulously done, beautiful fence that he had put around it, had poured an entire large concrete patio. Right behind the fence was this really nice-looking boat, but it was parked on the concrete patio. It wasn't sitting in water. The house down in North Carolina was sitting right on the water, a place for that boat right in the backyard. Big deal. But here's the difference. It was pretty obvious to me that the space between that house and the one they had was a $50,000 price reduction. Anybody been there? Right? And so in looking at that, if I focused on the facts and the figures, we would have been talking about a $50,000 loss from somebody's bank account. But here's what I heard in the conversations. First of all, we agreed to take them down to look at it. And as I sat there watching him look out the window at that backyard, you could see that the emotional purchase was happening. And I'm not talking manipulation, guys. I'm not talking about manipulating people into a decision-making process. I watched the legitimate emotional connection that that individual had to that piece of property. And when you see down here, we aren't selling to who they actually are, but who they want to be. And while I was standing there, something pretty magical happened because they started talking about the kitchen and all the different things that were going on. And somebody said something about making food, and one of the kids that was in there said something about Kraft macaroni and cheese. And the wife of the guy with the ponytail and all of those tattoos all over his arms said, "Oh, well, that's the last thing you'll ever see him eat. He won't eat Kraft macaroni and cheese. He's not going to eat banquet dinners, right? He's not going to do ramen noodles." In fact, those were the three things that she referenced. Because when he was a kid, what do you think? That's all he got fed. Those were his meals. And so all of a sudden it became very obvious that this decision that he was making was about who he was aspiring to be. That boat sitting in the water behind the house, instead of behind the fence at the home they owned, was the difference between a norm and success. That was his definition of success. And so when we look at this, and this is something else I'm happy to share with you, but it talks about what high-impact motivators are that people have. And in doing this, it says, to be the person I want to be, fulfill a desire for ongoing self-improvement, live up to their ideal self-image. Now, do you think if we weren't aware of the fact that every time, not just once in a while, every time you deal with an individual, if you don't shift out of the facts and the figures of the real estate business into the emotional connection that drives that person, do you think there's a pretty darn good chance you might miss something really important? Fair enough? Well, here's one of the other things that I wanted to share with you. And you're welcome to have a copy of this too, because it's not one or the other. Once I understood the emotional drive, what was driving his decision-making process, then I had a $50,000 gap to close, right? And so I ended up putting together a spreadsheet. And it said, this is your perfect situation. First column, left side. Hey, if the house sold, just like she told you it would at that price under those terms, and you bought this one, this is where you would be. Now, if we take you down and make the house down in North Carolina your priority, and we make this one saleable so I can get your property sold and move you on, this is what your situation would be. And his conversation with me was, well, I'm not sure that I'm willing to lose $50,000. And I said, well, I think that's our real decision. Because what we're looking at is what's more important to you, to gain the house in North Carolina or to keep the one you have. That's your conversation. And that was as simple as the conversation was that we had. Do you want to gain the one in North Carolina or keep the one here? The only thing standing in between those two decisions is what? $50,000. And just like that, he gave up the $50,000. He said, so you're asking for a $50,000 price reduction. I said, if you want the house. He said, okay, we'll do it. The house sold, his house sold in it was probably less than 14 days. It closes on the 30th this month with a simultaneous closing for the house that's down in North Carolina. He sat for 90 days with nothing, and within 2 weeks had both houses under contract, a $50,000 price reduction, and this man gave up nothing to get what meant the most to him. He was aspiring to who he thought and what he wanted to become and his definition of success. How do you interact? Because there's going to come a day they're going to walk off. They're going to walk out of that community, that connected consumer community. They're going to walk out of it. And when they do, how are you going to greet them? How are you going to align with who they are? And here's why it matters again. First of all, if you haven't seen this book, it's one of my favorite. I probably, told everybody about it for the last who knows how many years, because that book is so true in the sense of people make decisions based on two main things, a fear of loss and a commitment to a chosen path. And see, here's the transition that took place with him. My question to him wasn't, what are you going to lose if you sell, right? Because what was he going to lose if he sold? $50,000. My question to him was, what are you going to lose if you don't sell? What was he going to lose? The home that was the sign of success in his life. So what are you going to lose if you sell is where we get stuck in facts and figures. What are you going to lose if you don't sell is when we understand the emotional charge that causes people to make decisions. That when you think again, facts cause people to think, emotions cause people to act. How many of y'all have heard somebody say to you recently, well, I think we're going to think about it? Sound familiar? I think we're going to think about it. And what they're really saying is we might have mastered the discussion of facts and figures, and we never got to the discussion of why they're emotionally motivated to move forward in the first place. All right? This is one of the statistics that came out of a study that showed that the customer's experience that maximizes the emotional connection resulted in customers who are 6 times more likely to consolidate their assets. Now, see, what that means to us is when we talk about consolidating assets, what that tells me is if I connect to you emotionally, you may not buy another house from me, but you may do what? What are we after? Referrals. Because here's the deal. Referrals are 10 times more valuable to you than the next house somebody buys from you. Everybody in a database can refer. Not everybody can buy. And when I do any kind of coaching, when I'm sitting down and I'm looking at the numbers from somebody in regards to their coaching, I go right to SOI sales, SOI referrals, and SOI past clients. And if I see that SOI sales is 15 and SOI referrals is 3, I know immediately that agent is teaching nobody to refer. There's no way you can. You can't get 15 sales out of a sphere of influence database and get 3 referrals when everybody can refer and not everybody can buy. It's a very, very clear message immediately that you're not teaching people to refer. The emotional side of it. But let's talk about how we get to those referrals. Here's the next 3 C's. We talked about the 3 C's that Michael Dell had discussed, but these are the 3 C's of engagement. 3 C's of engagement. Communication, cooperation or collaboration. Communication, cooperation, or collaboration. Now, if we want to talk to people within their realm, let's move them back in. We'll take them back to this concept of being in this connected consumer community, this protected, isolated environment. How many of you all are communicating with them on a regular basis? Texting, right? Emails, drip campaigns, it's all going out there. How many of y'all are spending thousands and thousands of dollars to make sure that we're dripping on them and we're sending them the texts and we're following up on anything that we can to communicate with somebody? Now, I'm not saying that that's not a portion of anybody's business. I mean, when I'm doing coaching and when I'm talking to people about that, what I'm really drilling into is the balance between where your business is coming from. And there's plenty of people out there that are able to do business or a portion of their business coming from that side of facts and figures and communication. But the real money comes when we talk about either cooperation or collaboration. And see, here's the difference. Cooperation basically is built on mutual respect, which means we've got to interact, which means they've got to come offline, right, and interact with us. Excuse me. We can see some of this when we are sitting in some cases, association meetings. Isn't it possible to sit in association meetings, everybody to have respect for each other, and in some cases we'll have short-term or long-term goals, but we don't always get to the bottom line of making major changes? The second thing is going to be collaboration. With collaboration comes mutual trust. And out of trust, when you trust somebody, we become vulnerable. And remember what we said here, that trust is at the root of their culture. See, as much as we want to figure out that they're disconnected, they have a very clear understanding of what it's like to trust somebody. They recognize it, they feel it. And so our number one job when we're interacting with people out there that are coming out of this connected consumer opportunity or environment is to learn how to connect with them in a way that they trust us. And when we talk about how we build trust, it's first of all authenticity, right? The second thing is transparency. Isn't that one thing that the connected culture or consumer really loves about their environment? Is they like the transparency. So when we're dealing with people, it's not about sales, guys, in any way, shape, or form. In fact, it's not about manipulation. It's exactly the opposite. It's this idea that we really care enough about our people to dig in, figure out what means something to them, and build a relationship of trust for this main reason. We call ourselves a trusted advisor too loosely. We have to work to be a true trusted advisor. And trust or loyalty is trust in action. And loyalty ultimately is the DNA of referrals. Now think about that. So when we go through this process, trust leads to loyalty. And loyalty is at the DNA of the referrals that are going to double your business. So we can continue to communicate and do all of our texting and all the other stuff that goes on. Or we can figure out that there's a flip side to that record. Emotional selling. It's the absolute difference between you doubling your production in 2020. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And we'll finish with this thought. In one of my classes, I always ask them, okay, guys, if you had to choose between one or two, you only get one choice. Would you say it's more important to be high tech or high touch? Did everybody say? I heard a lot of high touch, right? If you had to choose high tech or high touch. And most of the time, there's some very lively conversation. Everybody has their opinions of why high touch is unbelievably important. Everybody has their conversation about why high tech. Obviously, with some of the conversation that we had today, they would probably preface that high touch is there, but here's what I can tell you. Somebody that is good at high touch isn't going to be beat by somebody that's great at high tech. They're going to be beat by somebody who's just as good as they are in a relationship scenario and can eat their lunch when it comes to technology. But that street runs both ways. The person who's great at technology is not going to be taken over by the person that's great at relationships. They're going to lose it to somebody who's just as good as they are at technology and beats them all day on relationships. They both matter. And so I'm going to leave you with that thought today. High tech, high touch, emotional selling. Remember and never forget it. Facts cause people to think, but emotions cause people to act. Thank you so much.